here with us, or would you prefer to just come to the podium? Yeah. Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, of course. No worries. And when you come back, you'll sit on the podium, or do you want to sit there? Where do you want your little name tag thing? It's okay? Okay, cool. Thanks. See you later. Yeah. And Juan Carlos, whenever you're ready to come join us. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the event Harnessing Data for Policymaking, Advancing Food Security and Decent Jobs in the Agri-Food Sector. My name is Christine Campo. I'm CARE's Global Policy Director, Food and Nutrition Systems, and I'm happy to be your moderator today. Due to some unforeseen circumstances this week happening within the building and with a lot of CFS side events, for those joining us online, unfortunately you will not be able to use the chat function, nor will you be able to unmute yourself or turn on your camera. We apologize for that. This is a problem that's beyond us. However, the meeting will be recorded, so you can share it with colleagues after today. I'm going to kick right off. We have the ILO Director of Sectoral Policies, Frank Hageman, online with us. So Frank, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christine, and good afternoon to you all, Excellencies, colleagues, delegates, and friends. It's a great pleasure to address you today in the side event.
FAO IT support team. Frank should be able to have audio and visual now. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Now we hear you, Frank.
Okay, very well. Well, thank you very much, Christine, and good afternoon to you all, Excellencies, colleagues, all delegates and friends. It's a great pleasure to address you today in the side event. Thank you very much for joining us to discuss how we can harness data for better policies to promote decent work in agri-food sectors. We are gathered here, I think, with a shared conviction, and that is that no transformation of our food systems can be truly sustainable unless it is also equitable and just. And at the heart of that vision lies decent work. Work that ensures dignity, safety, fair income, and rights for all those who feed the world. Yet, I must say, the reality remains stark. Across the globe, while around 1.3 billion people work in agri-food systems, nearly 2/3 of the world's poor still work in agriculture, often in self-employment and unpaid family work. Agriculture is also the sector which accounts for the largest share of child labor. 13% of all adult forced labor involving 2.1 million people also takes place in agriculture. Workplace injuries or poisoning from agrochemicals affect millions every year. Climate change is already having profound impacts on the safety and health of agricultural workers. In fact, at least 2.4 billion workers are exposed annually to excessive heat at work. And too often agricultural workers remain excluded from basic labor protection, such as minimum wages, adequate occupational safety and health, and access to social protection. Migrant and casual workers are especially vulnerable, and they are often invisible in data and policy alike. This is not only an issue of fairness, but it also represents a missed opportunity. Because decent work lies at the foundation of more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food systems, as well as of thriving rural economies, and of course, social stability. In recent years, ladies and gentlemen, decent work has been increasingly recognized as an effective instrument for fighting poverty, inequality, and food insecurity. In 2021, the UN Systems Summit, the UN Food Systems Summit, that is, underscored the critical role of decent work in attaining the SDGs, identifying it as a key area for building sustainable food systems. That is why the Coalition of Action on Decent Work for Equitable Food Systems, co-led by IFAD, us here at the ILO, and CARE International, was created following the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit. The coalition's shared vision is to advance economic and social justice through decent work for all food system workers. And our mission is clear: to accelerate collaborative action that improves livelihoods, promotes equity, and drives systemic change. Colleagues, the ILO's Decent Work Agenda offers many instruments, approaches, and tools to support governments, employers, and workers in promoting decent work in agriculture and driving meaningful change. I had the privilege to contribute to last year's CFS plenary discussion on the role of decent work in agriculture and food systems, which outlined the importance of policy coordination and cross-sectoral policy coherence. In fact, the session called for further strengthening of our collective efforts to design policies and programs that promote decent work in the agri-food sector. In that regard, the ILO's policy guidelines for the promotion of decent work in the agri-food sector, adopted here in Geneva in 2023, are particularly relevant. These guidelines are the first comprehensive global tool on the subject, developed through tripartite negotiations. They provide concrete, actionable recommendations on the design and implementation of employment and labor policies, including legislation, as well as the roles and responsibilities of governments, employers, and workers. But designing and implementing effective policies begins with evidence. This means improving the quality and availability of data about employment and working conditions in the agri-food sector, disaggregated by sex and age. Reliable and comparable labor statistics are essential to understanding sectoral trends and target support where it is most needed. Please note in this context that we here at the ILO have recently developed a portal, a web-based portal, providing access to sector disaggregated labor statistics. More specifically, the Job Agri initiative offers a unique opportunity to advance methodologies for data collection and analysis, helping us to identify which activities and subsectors hold the greatest potential for job creation. We will hear more about that today, but just in short, Job Agri is a partnership between the AU, the African Union, the ILO, FAO, and CIRAD. The project is supported by Germany's Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, or BMZ in short. By combining better evidence with stronger policy dialogue, Job Agri seeks to strengthen the ability of agri-food value chains to create decent work, raise productivity, and enhance food security. Today's discussion is also about connecting ministries of labor and agriculture, linking researchers with policymakers, and empowering workers and employers organizations, as well as other stakeholders, to use data as a tool for policy dialogue. Our collective experience shows that progress is possible when evidence, political will, and social dialogue come together. The Job Agri initiative, which will be discussed subsequently, offers a concrete example of this approach in action. As we move forward, let us remember, the agri-food data we gather is not just numbers. It is a lived reality of millions of women and men who feed the world. Our responsibility, our shared responsibility, is to make their work visible, their rights respected, and their voices heard. Together, through better data, more effective policies, and stronger collaboration, we can build agri-food systems that are not only productive and sustainable, but also fair and human-centered. I thank you very much.
Mr. Hegman, thank you for being with us today. The ILO policies on the promotion of decent work in the agri-food sector, I'm pleased to say, is being rolled out in countries right now, including my government. The government of Canada will be looking to integrate that nationally in 2 weeks' time. So very good progress on this. And as Mr. Hegman said, this is done in collaboration with IFAD as well. So we are very fortunate to have Juan Carlos Mendoza with us today, the Director of Environment, Climate, Gender, and Social Inclusion Division. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure for me to be here with all of you, particularly with partners such as ILO and CARE, with whom, as you may know, since the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit, we have been co-leading the Decent Work for Equitable Food Systems Coalition. And it is that job creation is really the most important development challenge in the world at this moment. From everything from reaching the poverty reduction objectives that governments and the global community have, to keeping the social cohesion and stability of countries, there is nothing more important than job creation, particularly youth job creation. They are the surest path to prosperity, dignity, and empowerment. As I said a few years ago in a different forum when I used to work on matters of social protection and social safety net, the best or the most effective social safety net, in a sense, is not needing one because you have good, decent, stable jobs. And I just came back last week, actually, from Kenya, where I was visiting IFAD's Agribusiness Hub program. This is an initiative that we're implementing in 9 countries, which focuses on creating jobs and or supporting youth entrepreneurship in 9 countries in Africa. And we have had very outstanding results at this point, with more than 60,000 rural youth being supported with a strong focus on young women's economic empowerment. And the reason why I mentioned the Agribusiness Hub is because in the meeting we had last week, which was just a policy forum bringing together the participants from 9 countries, both youth as well as government officers, the discussions highlighted the centrality, the importance of data in this context, data at many levels. This is critical, obviously, from the point of view of designing programs that make sure that, for example, we understand the needs of those who need the jobs, but also the needs of the private sector that demand those jobs. But also, we need data to make a case of why this is important. And this is not only to donors. This could also be to the respective line ministries. As you know, IFAD's main counterpart is generally ministries of agriculture. So for the average minister of agriculture, his or her main interest is, for example, food security or food sovereignty. It's not necessarily jobs, but it is by presenting evidence that show that both areas reinforce each other, that as you create jobs in the food systems, and particularly in rural areas, you are also contributing to food security. This creates a real trust for investment in this area. There were some key lessons that we discussed in the forum related to data. One, the one that I mentioned, the importance of linking or understanding what are the unmet needs of the private sector, because we have, in many of the countries where we work, both youth unemployment, but at the same time, the private sector feels that there is a shortage of skilled labor with the skills that are needed. We also noticed that there are gaps, and I think we'll be talking hopefully later about this, that need to be addressed when it comes to data on job quality, what it means, income security, and gender inclusion. And ultimately, how to better assess what are the type of jobs, what are the type of interventions that truly contribute to decency, equity, and resilience in these jobs. We need to continue using data as we design, monitor, and also to be able to justify scaling up. And policymakers have a very clear role on this, ensuring that there is the political momentum to support these types of programs, to collect this data and to disseminate it, to ensuring that there's policy coherence, and also to highlight the reinforcement that, for example, decent job creation has, again, on social safety. For example, one of the things that I heard last week from one of the participants on our program is that we are also supporting these new young entrepreneurs to comply with local labor laws, a key component to be able to upscale these initiatives. So in closing, I just invite all of you to continue working in this area, to use data to facilitate mobilizing political support for these initiatives, to mobilize finance, to continue increasing research and innovation, and having knowledge and policy dialogues such as the ones we're having today. In closing, again, I would like to thank all the partners here, particularly ILO and CARE. And as we move forward, let us remember that decent jobs are not just a development goal. They are ultimately a development guarantee that make the work that we do more sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mendoza. I know you have a very competing schedule today, so feel free to excuse yourself when you need to. So those were our great opening remarks that set the scene for our conversation today. But we are very fortunate to have Pierre Girard with us from CIDAD Research Fellow, who will be giving us an excellent keynote address to give us some of the data behind what it is that we're talking about today.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you see? Okay, you see the screen. I hope you see it online as well. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this side event. We know that it's Friday afternoon, last day of the week of the CFS, so thank you for being here. So the presentation I'm going to do comes from a collaboration between ILO, FAO, CIRAD, the African Union, and the Institute for Statistical, Social and Economic Research at the University of Ghana. So together we are working together to better understand employment in the agri-food sector. And what I would like to do today is to show why good data really matter to design public policies that can create decent jobs in the agri-food sector. So to do that, I will share some insight from Job Agri, a project who has already been mentioned, and we are a project that we are implementing in Ghana. But first of all, okay, let me go to the next slide. Or maybe I use this one. Whoop. Okay, I'm coming. Okay, not too fast. Okay, sorry. So, but let me start by placing the question of employment in agri-food systems in the broader challenge of structural transformation in Africa. The region is facing a massive demographic shift, and 300 million young people will enter the labor market in the coming decades. And this raises a question: can African economies create enough decent jobs for them? Today, what we see is that over 60% of workers are still in agriculture and agri-food activities, and this will remain the case for the years to come. So food systems are central. for African economies. They must feed a growing population, and they must provide jobs and incomes while being sustainable. But this employment dimension of food system is still too often overlooked. And moreover, if employment and agriculture are often at the top of the political agenda in many African countries, the two policy areas still work in silo. And last but not least, there is also a lack of data to inform the labor content of agri-food systems. So, considering this context, we have developed JobAgri, an original approach to better connect evidence and policy. So this approach is built on two pillars at the national level. First, it looks at policy occurrence by reviewing national development policies, national developments. And second, it involves the collection of new primary data on labor in the agri-food sector, in line with the African Union's agenda, in line with ILO standards definitions, and in close collaboration with national institutions. So finally, the approach is on sharing the results to inform public policy action through multi-stakeholder dialogue involving workers, employers, farmers, and ministries. So how can we make the agricultural sector a real source of decent jobs? And what are the big questions we need to ask? And that JobAgri is working to answer. Do small-scale actors provide more employment opportunities than large ones? Can be a first question. And for whom exactly? For women, for youth, for men, for casual workers, for family? And what about production models? Do agroecological farms really create more jobs than those relying on chemical inputs, for instance? And how decent are jobs along the value chain? So to address these questions, JobAgri brings a few important specificities. First, we go beyond a narrow focus on farming. We look at jobs all along the value chain, from agro-input dealers to final traders. Then, we aim to make the invisible visible, especially looking at casual workers or youth and women's contributions to labor. And third, we are deepening what decent work really means in the agri-food sector. So in 2024, like 1 year ago, we launched a JobAgri pilot in Ghana, supported by BMZ. And we focus here in Ghana on the maize value chain in one region of Ghana. And in this pilot, we surveyed nearly 950 farming households, 30 corporate farms, 660 processors, traders, transporters, and agro-input dealers in that region. So today, I'm really pleased to share with you some first insight and preliminary data, preliminary results emerging from this still ongoing research. So first of all, what do we see along the maize value chain in the Bono East region in Ghana? So you see these figures show the average number of full-time equivalent jobs for different scales of processors, retailers, and aggregators. And two main points stand out. First, processors tend to create fewer jobs on average compared to retailers and aggregators. Second, when we look at small and medium-scale actors, the number of jobs is quite similar. But for large-scale actors, the numbers increase sharply. Why? Mainly because bag handling is still done manually in that region. So the more bags to move, the more jobs are created actually. But we should also question the quality of these jobs because it involves, carrying heavy loads. When we dig into the data on who is actually doing these jobs along the value chain, we see very different situations according to the type of actors and to the scale. Let's start with the processors on the right. Across all three scales, most of the work is done by permanent male workers, and this does not really change as we move from small to large processors. Then, for retailers in the middle, the story is quite different. Many women manage small or medium-scale retailing, but as the scale grows, the share of casual male workers increases sharply. And finally, aggregators, we see that even small-scale aggregators mostly rely on casual workers since their main activity is also bag handling. So this brings to us an important example of questions for public policy, for instance. How can we boost women's employment along the value chains? There are two options which are not like exclusive. We can support, I mean, public policy can support retailers if the overall structure of employment remains the same, or public policy can support the creation of new opportunities for women within medium and large-scale actors. Let's now go look at the segment of agricultural production. So first of all, when it comes to the farm, we decided to go beyond a strict value chain approach, as family farms rarely depend on a single crop, okay? And most of them are also engaged in non-farm activities, which are interrelated with farming activities. So that's why we have like a systemic approach to capture labor at the level of farming households. So what we can see in short on this slide, it's like at the regional level, we can say that on average, one family farm provides about 1.5 full-time equivalent job, which represents roughly 190,000 jobs at full-time equivalent jobs at the regional scale. Among these jobs, about 60% are provided by small-scale farms. Then, when we look at the number of jobs per hectare, which is an interesting also indicators, because it helps to understand which type of farms can create more job, I mean, is more labor intensive in relation with the farming system and with agricultural practices. And what we can see here in this region in Ghana, we see that tuber-based, low-intensified family farms generate more jobs per hectare. So this could be an interesting policy options or policy entry point to support job creation in this region, for instance. Now, again, if we look at who is actually doing these jobs on family farms, we can see that family labor remains predominant, even if there are some differences according to the different farm type. But however, the contribution of casual workers is far from negligible. It represents between 25 to 45% of the total labor. And this situation raises an important question for public policy as well, aiming to reduce vulnerable employment. The same farms actually generate vulnerable employment for both family workers and casual workers. So policy needs to be tailored to address the needs of both groups of workers. Let's now look at remuneration on farms, which is part of remuneration, is part of decent work. And in particular, the wage gap among casual workers between men and women. So our data shows that, on average, casual women workers earn 42% less than casual men workers. But we can also see that this gap varies a lot depending on the crop and the task. For example, in maize production, the gap reaches 68% for planting, but it drops to around 10% for harvesting. So if we really want to narrow the gender gap, public policy must also take into account these crop and task specific differences. Just wait, last slide. Just to conclude, these preliminary insights on what we have done with Job Agri in Ghana highlight the importance of data for guiding public policies that can create decent jobs in the agri-food sector. First, we think that looking at how value chain analysis, production models, and farm structures interact help to better identify the right policy levels, which of course differs by segment and by the size of actors. Second, vulnerable workers represent a large share of the workforce and need specific intervention. So integrated decent work into agricultural policy is key to the inclusive agri-food sector transformation. Then, agricultural employment creation is also a matter of complementarity with non-farm jobs. This is supposed to develop employment policy which recognizes multiple job holdings. And finally, we should remember that small and medium scale actors have a key role to play in job creation, and public policy need also to recognize them. Thank you for your attention. I did it in 10.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Girard, for highlighting some of the key questions: large-scale versus small-scale farming, agroecology versus chemically input-based farms, who is doing the jobs at what scale, and what is the potential for women. So we look forward to hearing more as Job Agri continues its work, and hopefully in more countries, so that we have better insight. So we're fortunate as we move into the multi-stakeholder panel that we get to hear what this Job Agri looks like in Ghana. So joining us virtually is James Ayeti, the Director of Statistics, Research and Information in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ghana. Mr. Ayeti, if you're with us, the floor is yours. Thank you. Sorry.
Hello.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I believe I can be heard. Good. I think it's good afternoon from Ghana. It's good morning over at your end. Yes, and I'm most excited to be here today to discuss what Job Agri has been doing in Ghana. It's been quite a wonderful opportunity to have Job Agri doing this work in the country, and really appreciative of the kind of results that are coming up from the Job Agri program, as we heard Pierre Girard make his presentation of the preliminary findings. Permit me to make a quick note of correction that I'm actually originally from the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So just a gentle note of correction at that. Thank you very much. So quickly, let me talk about the Job Agri, the significance of the Job Agri program in Ghana. To do that, I would like to go quickly into a little bit of historical antecedent and a background. The objectives of the Job Agri has been the need to generate new evidence based on policies. New evidence to inform policy making, so that policies will be based on data or evidence from the field. In order to do that, Job Agri has set the objectives to identify development options for the agri-food sector, but then also to promote its potential for growth and development. To achieve these objectives, the Job Agri program in Ghana, and I believe across any other place where it's been undertaken, has three main components: a multi-stakeholder forum component, the policy mapping component, and then the data availability component to feed into policy making. Fortunately, in Ghana, we've had the opportunity of trying to improve upon the methodology of data collection in the labor content space in the agricultural sector. And what Job Agri has been able to do with the support of ILO and other partners is to be able to conduct a pilot study in the Bono East region, both at the farm level, and then that is on farm level, and then also off farm level, to determine what the information needs to be gathered to feed policymakers in the agricultural sector within the country. And as you would have seen from the results that came, there have been some exciting findings coming out of the program already. For us as a ministry, I think this is very, very paramount, because our policies, we realize, have to be based on data, has to be based on the evidence. And this is one area that we have struggled a bit with. If we look at the various gamut of data that we are collecting in the country, data on the labor content that goes specifically into agriculture, it's quite missing. And so this is exciting because as we see the job agri data collection process going on, is beginning to unearth a lot of revelation for us and a lot of indicators that will now give us that confidence to move into various policy formulations and implementations to help improve the volume of jobs in the country and also to create wealth within the country. In fact, some of the significant insights that we have had from the Job Agri program, as we would take note, is the fact that, for instance, family work is dominant, especially at the household level, contributing 57%, and 41% is also being contributed by the youth. Also, very significant is the fact that small farms provide more jobs compared to large-scale farms, based on the data that is coming out from the job agri findings that we are having already. Typically, we have known that the bulk of agriculture in Ghana, for instance, is based on small-scale farming, and policy has been trying to improve commercialization to improve the number of large-scale farmers. So it will be interesting to note how we take this forward. If we are also, and definitely as we are also thinking about wealth creation and job creation, then how do we handle this? Do we encourage more people into large-scale farming, or do we improve upon the performance of small-scale farms in order to achieve these objectives? We also see that majority of jobs is provided by small and medium-scale farms from 2 hectares to 10 hectares. They provide about 60% of the jobs in the sample that was used for the job agri work. Smaller farms, we have to take note, provide as many jobs as larger farms within the sample. Workers, according to farm size, include family workers. We also have large farms employing more casual workers, with an increase in the share of women as casual workers. Family workers also contribute to almost 50% of the work on larger farms as well. In terms of the value chains or the various crops or commodities that provide more labor content, maize, for instance, was discovered not to be as labor demanding as others in terms of the number of hours per hectare that goes into it. But nonetheless, it contributes a lot more in absolute terms because you have a greater cultivation of maize across the country. It is probably the most significant and the most popular crop grown in the country. But other less prominent crops like pepper, yam, cassava, and groundnut are more manual, as discovered from the findings from the Job Agri program. So then the interesting thing is, how do you promote these crops if we are to increase job volumes and then create more wealth? Pepper and groundnut particularly shows to do well with women. And so when we are discussing inclusivity, then these are the crops that policymakers may be very much interested in. Another important thing that we have noticed from the Job Agri data collection effort is the fact that workers, permanent workers, collect more than casual workers. They collect about 750 Ghana cedis per month on the average. And that is quite significant because quite often it's difficult for the government to gauge how much income is being earned by workers in the agricultural space. And this is quite important because if we are to put in policies to stop rural-urban migration, then this is an area that we're going to think of addressing. And once we have the data, then we can make meaningful and scientific comparison between the agricultural sector and other sectors to solve that problem. But the good about the agri-job work is that it doesn't limit itself to the on-farm activities, but it stretches beyond the on-farm to on-farm, generating on-farm indicators as well. What we have realized is that as policymakers, these indicators, as we have seen discussed by Pierre, have the potential to help us create more jobs as we improve upon dietary diversity and value addition. Now, as we improve on dietary diversity and value addition, we are bound to create new and better jobs. And we are being given that data to be able to put in place policies to do that. We also see that the value chain approach that is being adopted under the job agri process is quite significant because it helps us to address simultaneously both off and off-farm constraints to help us expand jobs, the quality of jobs, and the inclusivity in the agri-food system sectors. So that when we talk about the creation of jobs in the agricultural sector, we are not just looking at what is happening on the farms, but then now we are looking at input suppliers, we are looking at producers, we are looking at traders. We are also considering processors. We're considering those also in the food service industry, and then those who, and of course, hotels who are significant consumers of food that is produced. Now, jobs can be created along all these value chain, and the information that is gathered will be quite useful to help us direct policies in all these areas. We are also seeing the opportunity to promote better jobs, higher paying jobs, more job security and stability, and then better working conditions. We also see that it gives us the opportunity to be more inclusive and to improve the inclusivity of various categories of people in the agri job workspace. So we are talking about the participation of women, the participation of the youth. We are also looking at the participation of other groups of people, for instance, the poor, how policies can be put in place to get more of those who are categorized as the poor to be involved in agriculture in such a way that poverty levels can be drastically reduced in this country. A discovery that we found from the job agri is that the large scale value chain businesses provide more jobs, as Pierre has indicated, especially when you go off farm. And so that is also quite interesting that as we seek to reduce unemployment in the country, then this is an area that we have to look at. Typically, a lot of effort has gone into improving productivity and production at the on-farm level. But now with job agri, we are seeing a huge gamut of opportunities to move into the off-farm agri-food system, where evidence shows that there is great opportunity to employ more and increase wealth in that area.
Right.
As far as the government, yes, sir.
Great. Thank you so much for your opening intervention. We want to save some time for Q&A, so I will ask our speakers to try and limit their presentations to 8 minutes. But you've been able to answer some of the big questions raised by Mr. Girard about your experience from the Ministry of Food and Agriculture in Ghana. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Hayati. We are going to move. We've heard a lot about job agri, but we know data for policy making is important in a lot of sectors and in a lot of projects. So I'd like to move us now to dairy. We're fortunate today to have Donald Moore, Executive Director from Global Dairy Platform, with us. And my question to you, Mr. Moore, is in his keynote, we heard Pierre highlight how data can make the invisible visible in our food system. So from your experience in the dairy sector and recently published Dairy and Socioeconomic Impact Report, how has data better helped us understand employment and social impact across the dairy value chain? floor
Yeah,
is
thank
yours.
you. Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of today's panel. I'm going to go back a little further, and I think I represent the private sector on this panel. I think I might be the only representative from the private sector. And so I want to talk not just about policy, but about action, actual action on the ground. And what do we do in the dairy sector to achieve that? Now, I'd love to tell you that we started with a level playing field, but for those of you who understand what's gone on in the last 20 years, animal agriculture was not always in vogue. And so we suffered for a number of years with animal agriculture being regarded as a bad player, I guess, at a global level. And so one of the things we had to do within the Global Dairy Platform and the dairy sector was to level that playing field again. And that's where the role of data became absolutely vital. As the Global Dairy Platform, we worked very closely with both FAO and IFAD to research and to publish papers on the important role that animal agriculture, in our case dairy, played in terms of a number of key issues. We published papers on dairy's impact on reducing poverty. We published papers on dairy's impact on health. But perhaps the most important publication was one that FAO helped develop for us, which was looking at greenhouse gas emissions from the global dairy cattle sector, and that was published in 2019. We presented that paper to the board of directors of the organization I run, and that board has the CEOs of 8 of the world's biggest dairy farms, dairy companies, I should say, not farms, dairy companies sitting on our board. And that paper looked at greenhouse gas emissions from the dairy sector over a 10-year period, and we discovered from that research that in that 10-year period, the emissions intensity, so the amount of greenhouse gas produced per kilogram of milk, had reduced 11%, a little bit over 1% per annum. So yield was increasing effectively. But at the same time, milk production in the world had increased by what was relatively staggering 30%. And so the absolute emissions had grown 18%. And we recognized that if we didn't get a handle on the absolute emissions from the dairy sector in due course, then our social license to operate would be challenged. But the other thing we learned from that study was that 80% of the emissions from the dairy sector were coming from emerging or developing markets, not from the more traditional westernized markets. So as a dairy sector, we partnered with the US State Department and with FAO and ultimately with IFAD to develop a program we called Pathways to Dairy Net Zero, which was looking at how do we tackle those emissions, and in particular in emerging markets. We identified 10 countries that between them represent 30% of all the greenhouse gas emissions from the dairy sector. And starting with the first 4 countries, which was in East Africa, we developed a program which recently received funding from the Green Climate Fund for $358 million to tackle the transformation of the dairy sector in those markets. Now, the reason I go through all of that is to explain that the work of programs like Job Agri is not just about creating policy. It's actually about enabling transformation on the ground, making finance available for farmers to actually start the process of transformation. The study that you referred to, Christine, is this one. It is available to download from FAO's website. It's Dairy and Socioeconomic Development. What evidence does the data hold? Not what data does the evidence hold. What evidence does the data hold? And in that study, it analyzed, it was co-funded by ourselves and IFAD, and it analyzed the development of the dairy sector in 187 countries around the world. And it noted that as the dairy sector develops, ultimately the number of farms does decrease, the productivity per farm increases, the amount of milk produced per farm increases, the income per farm increases, the amount of nutrition that is flowing through to the population increases and becomes more available, and at the same time the price for that nutrition in terms of purchasing power for consumers drops. And the other thing as your dairy sector develops is that it becomes more formalized, and therefore there's an increase in government revenues from taxation, which can be used to support other social outlets as well. The dairy sector, if you're not aware, is the world's largest agricultural commodity by value, 3rd largest by volume. There's about 112 million dairy farms in the world, with 600 million people living on those farms, and another 400 million people whose livelihoods are connected either pre-farm gate or post-farm gate with the jobs that the dairy sector creates. So we think that as an industry, it is an industry that has a very important social and economic role. In many parts of the world, women are unable to own land, but they can own cattle, and they can own the milk that comes from those cattle. So they receive the direct income themselves rather than it going through the male channel as opposed to female. We are, at this point, we have completed this study, but the next phase of this is looking really at off-farm employment. And so I'm really interested in the work that's already gone on in our colleagues' area here, but we're looking at off-farm work, and we're also looking at how we disaggregate the data by gender.
Great, thank you. I have a follow-up question, which I hope you can answer in a few minutes. Based on the dairy evidence that you've gathered, what are the implications for policy and investment, particularly in linking food security with decent employment?
Yeah, I think very quickly, there's a really quick answer to it. I think what we've done in the last 4 or 5 years working collaboratively with the United Nations agencies is we've started to demonstrate that investing in dairy is not just about investing in farming, it's about investing in nutritional security, it's about investing in emissions reductions, and it's about investing in women and youth employment as well. So there's a really strong message there now, and we're starting to see, I mentioned the program in East Africa, we're already at concept note stage in Pakistan for another $200 million project there. So we're starting to see investment coming back into agriculture in the form of the livestock sector, which we hadn't seen for nearly 2 decades.
Great, thank you for your intervention so far today, Mr. Moore. We've had a chance to hear from UN agencies, from governments, from the private sector. Now I would love for us to hear from Danilo Salerno, who is the Director of America's Region and Account Manager for Global Partnerships with the Rome-based agencies at the International Cooperative Alliance. My question for you, Mr. Salerno, is based on your experience and results raising from the UN International Year of Cooperatives, what is the main challenge to harness an evidence-based approach to multi-stakeholder partnerships for cooperatives supporting the sustainable transformation of the agri-food system?
Thank you very much, Christine, and thank you very much to all of you colleagues and organizers, also giving the voice to the cooperative movement, which, by the way, is also private sector. We're colleagues. And I was wondering how many of those family farming organizations in Ghana are cooperatives, so it would be interesting to go further and have a better understanding on how we collaborate on the field and how many data we are missing in order to demonstrate how much we are contributing to the SDGs. But to answer this question, the UN International Year of Cooperatives this year was an opportunity for us to create awareness regarding our contribution, not just on food security and on the creation of jobs, but also in a broader sense to advance the 2030 agenda. During this year, two important, and looking at job creation and food security and sustainable food system transformation, two model law came into action or in practice. The one for Africa, which was released or issued in 2024, and the one also during the same year for in the Americas. The one for Africa was recently presented a couple of weeks ago during the interministerial and the 14th African Ministerial Cooperative Conference held in Nairobi, Kenya, and was an evidence of a work of a partnership over the last 3 or 4 years, and this would provide a guidance for review the cooperative laws at national level, and also to provide a reference point for cooperative creating decent jobs and increasing food security, ensuring better production, better nutrition, environment, and life, also contributing to the FAO mission. At the same time, in the Americas, this model law issued by the Parlatino, the Latin America Parliament, made almost the same, but with some interesting points in terms of innovating and introducing also the importance of collecting data via cooperative platform, because we are facing this challenge in, we are very good, we have to say, in policy building and policy dialogue, but when it comes to data demonstration, we need more partnership, more support from the UN system, because we're not so good in sharing information and organize those information for policy making. The International Cooperative Alliance represents more than 300 organizations from 150 countries, 3 million cooperatives which provide jobs to at least 1.2 billion people. So we are equalizer, we create jobs, we work with the UN system. But we have some challenges when it comes to data gathering. To do so, we have to acknowledge that thanks to FAO and ILO, we are running this pilot study for creating statistics for cooperatives. And to measure the impact and economic contribution of cooperatives at the national level. The first challenge in this sense was the definition of what's the economic contribution, because when it comes to a system of national accounts, we are able to provide data, but where it comes to release or to create a policy for national governments, they have to deal with an unusual way to measure the impact that is done by cooperatives, because as you know, we go beyond the monetary aggregations or the monetary, let's say, measurement, and we deal with social capital, democratic governance, for instance, or a number of indicators that are being created via this partnership with the UN agencies. So it's just a challenge we are facing, and this year, the International Year, made us more aware of the fact that we have to work on some areas. One of these, and is an opportunity we have next year to collaborate and to foster our collaboration during the International Year of Women Farmers. So we are trying to create a bridge between the International Year of Cooperative this year and next year for women farmers, creating tools, but also measuring the contribution and in terms of economic impact, but also in job creation, especially for women and for youth in agriculture. And another area which is a regional agenda, especially for Latin America, but also a bi-regional agenda, Europe and Latin America, is given by the care economy. It is estimated that in the next 10 years, the people over 65 years age will duplicate. So in terms of job creation, there is a room, and especially in the rural areas, to work to create job or to formalize job, especially the ones given by caregivers, especially women, in order to keep the level of formality higher than now. And in this sense, cooperatives can contribute and can demonstrate their role for sustainable development. So it's a challenge for us, but also we have the time and the next year, and the experience of this year to support the job we are doing for sustainable development and the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Mr. Salerno. We have some time for Q&A, and again, I apologize to those of us joining online due to the challenges that we faced here in the building this week. We will not be able to take any questions from our online participants. But we do have about 10 minutes that we could use in the room if there are any questions that you have. Perfect. There's one at the back. There's a microphone coming right behind you. Thank you.
I have a question for Donald. The dairy example shows how data can link emissions, productivity and livelihoods. How transferable do you think that model is to other commodities?
Great. Maybe we take 2 or 3 questions. Anybody else? It looks somebody in the second row, please. Thank you.
Just a question for Pierre on methodology. You said that the methodology is different than the usual data collection that we have, label for survey, LSMS, and so on. Can you deep a bit on this, on the originality? And another one for Donald also, in the same line also, you show rather that the employment is decreasing in the dairy when the more milk is created by cow. Is that discussed especially in Africa, when you are talking about people from the value chain and with the policymakers?
2 excellent questions. Thank you, colleagues. Who wants to go first? Donald? Pierre?
I'm happy to go first. So the first question, I think, was Fiona, you were asking about the model that we've developed in the dairy sector and how transferable it might be to others. A lot of the work that we've done within the dairy sector globally, we do under the umbrella of an organization called the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a multi-stakeholder organization housed within FAO. And within that group, there is an action network on livestock for social development. So from a livestock perspective, we are working within that group. We developed this methodology, the methodology for analyzing what we call the dairy impact methodology for analyzing dairy socioeconomic impact, in a way that you could take our data out of it and you could use the same model for just about any other livestock commodity. And frankly, we think it applies to just about any agricultural commodity as well. So you could take that model and simply populate it with your own data. The data was extremely hard to come by. So imagine trying to find data sources in 187 countries. So in many different countries, we had to impute the data from a variety of different sources. And this is where, I think we've heard said several times during the week, at least in some of the meetings we were in, all models are wrong, some models are useful. So when you start with the amount of data that we're having to gather for some of these models, we need to be careful in that we take all the outcomes with a grain of salt. So I think the model can be applied. It's the data that's the hardest piece to get to. And if I were to get on my hobby horse about data for 2 seconds, we all rely upon FAO's livestock data for the analysis that we do, particularly when it comes to NDCs, Nationally Determined Contributions to the Paris Agreement. We use a model called GLEAM, Global Livestock Environmental Assessment Model. The data is from 2015. in that model. So just think about that. That's 10 years old. And if you drink enough beer with some of the people in FAO, they'll tell you some countries haven't updated their data since the 1980s. So, you know, we're working with some really rudimentary tools at a global level when we're talking about climate change and some of the key issues that are affecting us all. So I would put a huge plug in for anybody to get involved in helping to improve that data that exists. So that's maybe answered your question and given you something else to think about as well, Fiona. In terms of the question around as the dairy sector develops and grows, and it's in the study, you can read it, you know, what tends to happen is as the sector grows and develops, particularly in emerging or developing markets, where a lot of agriculture is actually subsistence rather than commercially oriented, what tends to happen is, yes, you know, some of those subsistence farmers drop off. They're no longer farming, but they're employed across the value chain, either in fodder production in the dairy sector or in processing. We are in the process of doing the study about employment along the value chain, so I don't have the exact numbers. I'm really interested in what's coming out of Job Agri, because I think they've got a model that maybe we can work with as well. So we are seeing that the number of jobs at a farm level reduces. But then across the value chain, we need to see what happens there.
Great, thank you, Pierre.
Yes, so if I may to answer to the question, so the difference between what we have done in terms of survey in Job Agri and the labor force survey or LSMS survey, I would say that first one main difference may be that we cover 1 year of what has been done at the farm level, what has been done on a farm throughout the year. And for value chain actors, it's the same. We have different, you know, rounds of data collection, like 3 rounds for farming households and 2 rounds for value chain actors. And from there, we were able to cover like 1 year of what have been done in terms of work and who has done this work, you know, on the farm or on the processing unit or etc. And which this way of, I mean, covering 1 year like that, we are able to cover and to understand seasonality. While when you look at most of labor force survey, for example, they have like a worker entry and they have a reference period which does not cover like the whole year. So you cannot like consider like the seasonality of the activity, which is like central and critical in farming. Yes, and I just want to emphasize on the value chain actors survey, which are, because there are a lot, LSMS are like household survey developed by the World Bank, but when you go to upstream and downstream activities, so when you go beyond the farm, there is not so much surveys. So I think it's also what brings new Job Agri. I mean, going beyond the household with value chain actors survey.
Excellent. Thank you both for your responses. I think since we're running out of time, I'm going to invite our closing remarks. We are very fortunate to have Lauren Phillips with us today, Deputy Director of Rural Transition and Gender Equality Division here at FAO. Lauren, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for the great moderation, and to colleagues for the excellent contributions. I really want to thank all of the speakers and panelists who were here for this rich conversation with different kinds of actors. And I think we really heard about 2 critical gaps in this conversation today. The first was a gap in evidence, and the second is a gap in partnerships. So let me say a little bit about both of those things and then what we could do to sort of take action to close those gaps. So I think we saw in some of the case studies that were mentioned that we need robust and integrated data. I liked the comment about all models are wrong, but some models are useful, right? So we do need robust and integrated data because we want to know the quality of jobs and the quantity of jobs that are out there in agri-food systems, and we want to know where there's inequalities in the opportunities and where there are deficits and gaps in terms of people's ability to access high-quality jobs. And these have been major themes of 2 of the reports that our division has been working on over the past couple of years. the Status of Women in Agri-Food Systems report in 2023, and the Status of Youth in Agri-Food Systems report in 2025. And both of them show that agri-food systems are a major source of livelihoods for women, and then for young women and men in those two different cases. But it also shows that both young people, including young women and women more broadly, are really in precarious jobs, jobs which lack full-time availability, which are, on own farms, and which do not have social protection or any kind of job protection at all. And so, with that knowledge, but also knowing that there are major gaps, it's really time for us to work together to sort of try to update the data, make it publicly available, and I think shine light also on where data is still missing or where it will become missing due to changes in the funding that's going for the creation and the maintenance of databases. Because I think, and one of the things that our reports really make clear is that there's a huge economic upside if we could include young people and women better in agri-food systems work. For example, we estimated that global GDP could increase by $1.5 trillion if we bring young people into the workforce, and 45% of that comes from agri-food systems, because it is such a dominant type of job opportunities for young people. Then we have this other gap, right, on partnership, where we need to really work in a collective fashion. So I was very happy to hear from the colleague from ICA, because cooperatives and rural organizations are obviously one of the most effective ways for young people to gain agency, and to gain access to finance, skills, training, and then to take a more active role in policy and decision-making in their communities, and then maybe in their local and national governments. And so I think that that sort of gap in, mobilizing people to act collectively is something that all stakeholders can encourage, whether governments, researchers, or civil society, and the private sector. Because I'm sure in the dairy value chain as well, as you mentioned, there's an overlap between cooperatives and the value chain. So what should we do better? Well, let's start with the partnerships. We have to strengthen partnerships, right? Because we need to translate what we know and what we don't know in a way that we are able to leverage our respective skills and abilities to make sure that we have a solid, evidence-backed policy recommendations which can be supported by the private sector and implemented by the public sector. So I really think that that is at the core of what we need to do. And then following on that, they're not the same thing, but invest responsibly and at scale, really, in the things that we've identified with our evidence that need to be done, to make sure that we have decent work outcomes. So we need to prioritize investments in social protection from the public side, skills training, maybe from both sides, and access to productive resources across the board. So I think that that is sort of where I'd like to end. We can't have a transformed agri-food system if we don't have decent employment opportunities for the largest group of people that are working in the sector, which are youth and women, as well, of course, as men. We need opportunities for everybody. So I think we can take what we're learning from these cases and really work together to make sure that that becomes a reality in the future. Thank you.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us today in the room and online. I want to thank very much all of our speakers. I think it's been a great event today. I've learned a lot. And I also want to thank our FAO IT colleagues, because I know there was a risk that we would not be able to have this event today. So again, we really appreciate you. Thank you so much, FAO IT. I wish everybody a good rest of your day and wonderful weekend. Thank you.